Hi, I'm Dan, and if you're new to homebrewing, so am I. Welcome to my adventures in homebrewing. Hey everybody, it's that time once more to go around the world one more time and have a beer or two along the way. Thank you so much for coming out this week. Let's say thanks to Cal Wallner of the Electric Brewery, who gave us a walkthrough of his electric brewing at his place. It was like quite the setup. It was like a small craft brewery in his basement. It was bar, his separate brew room. It's pretty cool. I do say, if you're looking at building this yourself, he is the guy to go and tee up with and check out. So this week, we have 1/3 of the Homebrew Happy Hour with us. We have the one, the only James Carlson, the man who was not on the show last time. So this week we get him all to ourselves, and we can heckle Josh, and he can't do anything about it. I'm not going to pick.
He can't.
I'm not going to pick on Todd because Todd controls a lot, but we can pick on Josh. It's
all day long. Yeah. He's fair game.
So hang tight. We'll be right back as we get a word from our sponsor.
Hey, it's Dan here one more time, and I'm happy to say that we are now, or should I say my podcast is now sponsored by Escarpment Laboratories, yeast production for the fermentation of the exceptional craft beer. Whether your kit is on the stovetop or in a commercial brew house, wholesale yeast and quality control for the profitable pro brewer, community engagement and education for the discerning home brewery. If you are a craft brewer and you love using quality yeast, then you really do need to check out Escarpment Laboratories.
The BrewTubers online store has everything you need for your brewing apparel and gift idea needs, with a growing selection of colors and sizes for hoodies, t-shirts, and caps. Stickers and magnets? Got 'em. Can holders and coffee mugs? We've got those too. Be the boss of your neighborhood and the envy of brewers everywhere when you flash that beautiful BrewTubers logo at your next local brewing competition. Want everyone to know you're a part of the Brew World Order? Strike a Superman pose with that BWO logo on your chest and make them all take notice. And if you haven't already, get over to our website at www.brewtubers.com and become a member. Then, just mosey yourself over to that BrewTuber store tab, click on it, and open the door to show the world you are a proud BrewTuber. Brew, record, post, repeat.
And we're back. So, like I said, we were fortunate to have someone that I actually have been following a bit, and also helped me choose when I was getting back into home brewing my actual Brewzilla or the RoboBrew at the time. So it's really, really cool. So, James, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing good. How you doing, Dan?
Good, man. Thanks for being on the show. Great.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So how about you tell us about a little bit about yourself and how you got involved with Todd and James?
Sure.
And Josh.
Well, I started a long time ago, probably like a lot of home brewers, and decided that I could save money if I just brewed at home. And boy, was I in for a rude awakening, because that's not the reason to get into home brewing. So my first setup, I drove all the way to Dallas on a Sunday, got the bug, wanted to get the equipment, made the worst first batch of beer I think I've ever had. I had to pour it out. It was so bad. And that's when I regrouped. I kind of had to sit down and think, okay, I just blew $500. Now, this was back in around 2003, 2004. So still a lot of money, especially for me at the time. And I thought, do I really want to do this and make a concerted effort to learn it the right way? Well, YouTube was fairly young back then. There was still a few videos on YouTube, not anything to write home at, but I got the Homebrewing for Dummies book, and then of course got the Papazian's book.
Yep. And
just bought magazines, just immersed myself in it. Second batch, I brewed a wheat beer, and it was actually really good. And from there on, I was hooked. So, rock on a few years, and I had conned a bunch of my friends into pulling our money together, and we built we call Big Bertha. It's a 40-gallon all-grain gravity flow system.
Damn.
And I remember we bought Blankman's largest boil kettle. It was 50 gallons. Mm-hmm. So I remember trying to find the biggest cooler I could get. It was basically just a just I guess you would call a batch sparge setup for the most part. A little tweaking. It's kind of a hybrid, but we brewed on that for many years and had real good luck with it. And Todd moved into the area and asked around who brewed, and I was about the only one that people knew.
Right.
And I'll never forget, I was working at the job at that time. Todd walked in and introduced himself and said that he has Keg Connection and that he would like to brew beer with me sometime. And we became fast friends, and he picked the right day to come in and talk to me. I actually was getting his oil changed. I worked at the dealership at the time, and I was pretty burnt out.
Yeah.
And he gave me a look, and I was getting coffee, and he said, "James," I turned around and he looked at me and he goes, "Are you all right?" And I said, "No, I've had better days." And he had to get a little grin on his face, and he said, "Let's go to lunch. I want to ask you about something." And that was when he offered me a job, and I was gone. I was like, hell yeah. Yeah, best job I've ever had. Great boss. We get to play around with equipment, and we travel around and travel and drink beer and brew beer. And I put the bug in his ear about building him his own HERMS system at home. And he was like, "Well, why don't you just try to do that?" So I built a controller from scratch from parts from Amazon. And we found the kettles, and we kind of pieced together a HERMS system, and he brewed for over a year on that until we actually developed what we have now, the Brautag. So it was about 4 years worth of playing around and lots of headaches and a lot of problems that we had to fix, but we're there now, and we're pretty proud of the system.
Right on. So now HERMS is heat exchange recirculating mash, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
And RIMS is recirculation infusion mash.
That's correct. You've got basically a little a tube with an element in it that the wort passes through. So it's not unlike an all-in-one with the element at the bottom. Mm-hmm. You've got a thermocouple that turns it on and off, and that's how it works.
Okay. So what's the benefit, I would say, for electric brewing with our HERMS versus electric brewing with our RIMS?
I think I like the fact that the element doesn't touch the wort.
Okay.
So the element boils the water or heats the water, and we have a 50-foot coil that the wort passes through. So that heat exchange is taking place in the hot liquor tank through a coil. So we don't have a hot burner that, especially if you've got a high gravity beer, there is cases where you could scorch the wort, especially if you have low circulation. That's usually one of the biggest things with a HERMS versus a RIMS is if you have a low circulation or stuck circulation, then that element will either burn the wort or pop, or burn it and then pop, or it'll hit the breaker. So I like HERMS because you just don't do that. If you have if your circulation slows down and you have to maintain it by stirring, everybody's been there, rice hulls, you don't have to worry about scorching anything.
Right. Okay.
It's just a lot easier way to brew.
So I've been it's new to me, we'll say, because I went to one of my friends who own a local brewery here, and veterans take care of veterans, which is kind of nice in my little world.
Yeah, that's cool.
I went in one day, we're talking, and I was just saying, "What's going on with you with your brewery?" I said, "Well, I'm looking at upgrading to a 20-gallon spike system." And like, "Oh, wow, what's that going to set you back?" And I said, "Well, I have to give up my firstborn child for it."
Yeah, and then some, right?
So they're like, "Oh, it's not much." I'm like, "Yeah, it's kind of expensive, so it's not going to happen right now, but it's going to happen eventually." He says, "Don't do that. Don't do that." I'm like, "Why?" "We have a 20-gallon pilot system we don't use anymore."
Oh, lucky you.
And I'm like, "What?" He says, "It's got the control panel, the pumps, the heat exchanger, all the hosing, everything. We'll give you the veterans price. Just come back next Wednesday when no one else is around, and we'll talk." Go in, and I'm like, I walked out with this thing, and now I'm looking at it. I'm like, where the hell do I start?
Yeah, it can be kind of overwhelming a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, when you first get into brewing on a 3-vessel, because I'm used to doing it just an all-in-one. I mean, it's been fantastic, but what are some of the main things when you're getting into a 3-vessel HERMS that we really shouldn't know about? I mean, I have an idea of watching what you and Todd did with the Brautag, where the hoses need to be connected, disconnected, and things like that. But I'm like, well, holy crap, what do you need for sparge water? What do you need for your strike water? What do you like? There's a whole lot of questions that, I mean, for someone who's just getting into something like
Sure.
this that are out there.
It's my best advice would be don't get overwhelmed, because it's really not as difficult. I can understand with the hose setup and the circuits, and you got an element in the bowl kettle, element in the HLT. You can't run them at the same time unless you have a special controller that runs 2 circuits at the same time. But it's real simple. The cool thing about a HERMS system is your HLT water is going to be your sparge water. So you just use that. It's already up to temp. You can do, a lot of people do mash outs. Todd doesn't, I do. You have the ability to do that. You can recirculate through every pump, and you can do a one clean out, which is really nice. I take them all apart and clean them by hand, but a lot of people do a CIP, just get all the bulk grains out and then just flush it into, like, we've got a drain in our brew room. So if we wanted to do a CIP, I could do a rough clean out, and then I could just rinse with a sprayer and just let it all go down the sink or the drain. But the cleaning's not bad. Temperature control's awesome. You don't have to worry about scorching wort because of an element hitting the wort. You don't have to do a mash out if you don't want to. You can just start sparging if you want to. It's real versatile. You have complete control over the mash and as far as your body. If you want to be beta the whole way, you can do that. If you want to mix a little beta and alpha for a little body on the end, you could do that too. It's as close to commercial brewing as you're going to get without the big expense. So the pilot system for you, that's perfect.
I mean, people are saying, what are you going to do with all that beer? Well, fridge.
Drink it.
Obviously, but it's but I can't drink 20 gallons. I mean, I probably could, my wife would kill me, but I usually, what I do is I keep 5 gallons for myself, and then I'll package the rest. And then I have friends come, what do you have in stock? I said, the fridge is there, donation jar is there, take what you want, and leave me a
grain bill
donation.
jar.
Yep,
that's perfect. I couldn't have said it any better myself. I know that with a HERMS system, the one thing I would tell people to look out for is water to grain ratio. You always want to be 1.5 to 1, 1.5 quarts per pound of grain. I've gone as high as 2 to 1, and haven't had noticed a big difference in the profile and the way the beer tastes. You just want to promote good flow. As long as you have good flow, you're going to have sugars, you're going to have efficiency, and you're going to have a better beer day.
Okay,
for sure.
Yeah, because there's a few big beers that I've got planned, so I've got to try and figure out what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So I've got
So I would tell you to probably scale the recipe, the volume down if it's a big beer, because you still want to have that ratio, and it's hard to do. With our 20-gallon setup, if we want to do anything over 8%, probably wouldn't be doing a 15-gallon batch, probably more like a 10, because you've got to displace that grain with water the best you can, or you sacrifice flow. You lose flow, you lose efficiency, and efficiency is everything, especially the price of grain nowadays. You want to get as much sugar as you can get per pound, for sure.
So do you still use rice hulls in the bottom of your mash tun?
I'm a boring brewer, is what Todd and Josh will tell you, because I'm just all about pilsners and lagers and 4.5 to 5%, no bigger than that. I like to have more than one beer without it making me want to go to sleep. So all my stuff's fairly light, and Todd here lately has been brewing these big 6, 7, 8% alcohol beers, and that's just not me.
That's normal here in Canada.
Is it really? Well,
I mean, no, the brewery here I work at, we released 3 imperial stouts this year around January, February. The strongest one was 10.5.
Wow. Yeah, that's a whole different level of yeast pitching and oxygenation on the wort, and there's levels that you can go at, and people will call me from time to time and ask me questions about a certain recipe or what, and I always tell them, look, if you're going to go big, you got to make sure you have your numbers, your yeast cell numbers. You got to make sure you have enough oxygen in there. It'll peter out every single time. Right, you can't skimp on that. So that's a whole big beer brewing's a whole different type of brewing. And most people that do it know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it is not for the faint of heart. I mean, I've maxed out the malt pipe on the Brewzilla. like
Yeah.
to the point where I thought, oh, this is not going to work, because I couldn't even see the overflow pipe anymore. That's how much grain was in this thing. So,
Yep.
I mean, like HERMS, from what I've read, is
Mhm.
like you're saying, the way to go to be on for for ease of use, and I think consistency.
Absolutely, yes.
But what are some benefits or cons to a rim system? I mean, they both exist.
I've actually never brewed on a rim system before. I would think there's less to do, maybe on a rim system, less equipment. You know, I just like the fact that I've got a coil immersed in hot water, and I don't have a pipe with an element that wart's circulating through.
Right.
But there's some people that do that. I had, there was, I can't remember the YouTuber name, but he had built a rim system. You used to see those a lot out of beer kegs.
Right.
And I had actually come real close to building one until I saw Spike system. And we actually were lucky enough, Todd bought a Spike system for us for our brew room. Fantastic system. I mean, that sold me on anything other than HERMS.
Okay.
Because, you know, I just like the fact that you can't scorch the wort. It just seems a lot simpler to me, and cleanup is easier. Now, y'all can comment if you have a RIMS. You'll probably disagree with me because I've never brewed on one, but it just seems to be, to me, it just makes more sense to not have to mess with that element in a pipe.
Okay. So now you mentioned the Brautag, and I promised Josh that we would talk about it. And
sure,
I've been watching you guys build, like, over the course, talking, and I see you guys using it. It looks like a really cool system. So tell me about it. Tell me about this beast.
Well, we when we started off, it was all just kind of I'm going to build Todd one, and then I'm going to build myself one. And I just wanted to see if I could do it. And the hardest thing was the controller, you know. So I literally bought the case on Amazon. I bought the temperature controllers, the contactors, the relays, all the little wire connectors, the wire in. It took me probably a month or two to build it.
Okay.
And we were sitting having a beer. We had actually brewed on the system. And Todd was like, what do you think about maybe down the road putting something like this out to sell? And I'll tell him, I said, I don't know. I was a little fearful about it because it's those kind of price points are, you know, we don't sell one every day. I can just tell you that, because it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
But it was a lot of fun getting everything together. We had to source a vendor for the kettles, and then we had to spec that out. And the hardest thing that we had was the false bottom. That was the biggest issue that we had with our system. It kept collapsing. And the reason why, if you think about it, if you've got a big, massive grain, watered down grain, and you're recirculating through it, you've got a low pressure area underneath the false bottom.
Oh, dead center. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So what happens is you've got a vacuum. That pump can generate enough vacuum under that grain bill. It works like a hydraulic press against the false bottom.
Right.
So, I mean, we were collapsing stainless steel legs on this thing, but I was adamant about having it high enough above the ball valve. Most people, they'll run it this far off the bottom, collect from the center.
Mm-hmm.
We don't. It filters through the entire grain bed and falls 2 inches underneath. And the reason why I wanted to do that is we found that it's a lot more efficient when we have, instead of pulling from the center, it's dripping down into kind of like an all-in-one does.
Yeah.
You know, the basket sits above the element, and, you know, it falls down, that the whole thing falls down versus pulling from the center.
That makes more sense to me than having, like, the mash tun that I got. Like, my buddy was saying, yeah, there's a false bottom in there. I'm like, I don't see a false bottom.
Yeah, it's right that high off the ground.
It's got one of those little like perforated metal discs with something connected to it, like a hose connected to it. Says, well, that's your false bottom. Yeah. I'm like,
and we thought about doing that, but the more I thought about it, I found a manufacturer that punched the steel out, and he put legs on it about that high. so happy when they brought the prototype in. I went ahead and set the system up. We had already sourced the controller parts. And first batch, it's going. It's probably not 1 or 2 minutes in the batch, and the wort coming into the mash tun started getting cloudy. Then it started getting chunky. And then there was pieces of grain going through, and I was like, crap, I know what this is. So I turned everything off, grabbed the bowl kettle because we weren't using it at the time, and just started shoveling grain into it.
Right.
And sure enough, the false bottom was collapsed and wrinkled in a corner. So it was just shooting all the grain to the ball valve.
Oh, no.
So I MacGyvered the heck out of that thing that day and saved the brew day. But I went into the warehouse, and we had some 2-inch PVC pipe. So what I did was I just cut a bunch of pieces 2 inches tall and just threw them under the false bottom and kicked it back up again. And it didn't collapse, but I probably had a half a dozen underneath there supporting everything.
Right.
And that was when I told Todd, we're going to have to go back to square one on the false bottom. I thought we were going to have to go to a center pull, which I didn't want to do.
Right.
So we contacted the manufacturer. They added more feet. And then I have a friend that does oil field CNC equipment. And he fabbed me out support rings out of stainless 304 stainless steel. And he saved my butt because we were looking at it completely just ditching all the false bottoms we already bought and having to start from square one. And our budget was pretty tight on the whole thing.
Yeah.
So we were able to, he had some old 8-inch tube left over from a project. And he was able to get me enough parts to fix the false bottoms that we had. And we actually, I've never collapsed anything since.
That's awesome.
It's pretty stout. It works really well. Thank God.
So are there generic false bottoms you can buy to put inside of the boil kettle or or mash tun or whatever?
Absolutely. In fact, if you go on the best resource, if you're wanting to build or homemade build, heck, you can find a false bottom for an old keg. I didn't say that. And I know nobody takes a keg and a beer keg and cuts the top and turns it into a home brewing system. I've never seen that. But if you happen to, there's probably measure the inside diameter. There's probably a false bottom that'll fit that as well. Okay. There's lots of resources on Amazon, guys, if y'all want to build your own equipment. And that's totally down my road. I mean, I love to build stuff from scratch to see how much money I can save, building something that would have cost me 10 times as much money. Lots of neat things you can do.
Oh yeah, I'm all about recycling stuff or rehoming stuff. That's why I reach out to my friends who are brewers and I'm like, well, are you looking to get rid of anything? I'm like, what do you need? And I'll give them a list and they're like, well, we don't use this anymore because we're playing on the big system now, so it's yours if you want it. I'm like, okay. Right. Then I bring it home. My wife's like, you have enough stuff. And I'm like, there's never enough stuff to play with. Never enough stuff to play with.
eBay is another good resource too for stuff like that.
It's funny you say that because I'm finding eBay's been more reliable to order stuff through and get it shipped across the border than it is going through like a mainstream homebrew store, ordering it from the States. And they're like, well, you're on your own now to find a shipping company to bring it to you. I'm like,
isn't that amazing?
It makes sense.
It's what's so frustrating for me is I can order and ship to China easier than I can ship to our neighbors north. I mean, and it should not be that way.
No, it shouldn't.
And I have, we have customers, C. & Becker customers in Canada that distribute our products. And I mean, the NAFTA forms are ridiculous and the paperwork's ridiculous. Something's not right if you can ship to China way easier than you can to Canada.
It's gotten weirder. I mean, politics are politics, and
I would never dare bring anything like that up. But shipping's still shipping.
All I can say is no politician ever plays nice.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's all I'm gonna say because I don't like talking.
I agree.
That's such a taboo topic.
Yeah, it is nowadays because it's also everything's so polarized. It's one extreme or the other. There's no middle ground, and that's the one thing that's great about homebrewing. There's not a lot of politics in homebrewing. And
that's what I like about homebrewing too. I'll get together with my friends, and as soon as someone says like, no, not here. Not today, guys. And they're like, what? You saw the rules when you came into the shop. This is what we talk about, not this. But now, back to what we were talking about, because
Sure.
I get distracted easy, shiny object syndrome. Kind of like Todd, not Todd, Josh. Sorry, Todd.
Josh, exactly.
Sorry, Todd. I got you confused with Josh. Didn't mean to. But now with the brow tag, you mentioned like you could, like, if you wanted to do something like run your HLT at the same time as your boil kettle, you needed an extra circuit on it. Did you guys ever think about having like that extra panel?
Yeah, if somebody contacted us interested in doing that, then I could do that. No problem. I would just need to give them a custom quote on the cabinet, because I build all the controllers.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And we had sat down and talked about it. Todd he thought maybe we ought to hire somebody to come in and do it. And I just told Todd, I said, you know what, I've gone through a big learning process over the years building these things. And I said, I don't really trust anybody to do it, especially if we're shipping these out to customers in their house. And because there's 30 amps at least running through that thing, 220, if it's not built right, or one little connection on the burner circuit is loose, it'll smoke that contactor. It'll burn the wire. Resistance is your enemy. And it'll do that. And I've been through it before. And we had a batch of elements that we bought, and they're tri-clamp elements, and they have the twist lock NEMA connector on it, just like we're using now. Well, I didn't check the contacts. There's actually a connection that converts that. There's lugs coming out the end of that tri-clamp element, and they made a fitting to fit over that to where you can put a plug on it. Well, those contacts have 3 screws. You've got your two 110s and your neutral. And if those aren't tight and loose, it'll burn the element. And we sent a system out last December, and the customer plugged it up. Brew day, had everything going, and it smoked the element. And I was like, ooh, this is not good. And he wasn't happy. He was super cool with me. Yeah. I shipped him out, priority shipped an element out to him. He was able to use the other element because, if you've got 2, and if you're only using one at a time, you can just switch that around and make save your brew day. He's able to do that. He called me and I walked him through it. But come to find out, I had to go back and check, because we have to get those heating elements from China. I'll be honest with you. We just can't. I don't know. I couldn't find anybody where I could get it sourced here in the States for that kind of specialty part. Right. So now the new one, all the ones on the shelf, I pulled the parts and went through each one, and half of them were loose. Oh, shit. Yeah, if that hadn't happened, everything we shipped out beyond that, the failure rate would probably have been 40%, and that would have been terrible, especially if they were on Reddit or social media. Yeah, would have killed our sales. So sometimes stuff like that can really help you if you can catch it in time, and thank God we were able to do that. So growing pains, little stuff like that, the false bottom, the controllers are pretty extensive. It'll take me about 8 hours to build one. But because of the fact that I know I built it, and I don't, if we've hired somebody to put those together, I'd worry every unit that went out. I would worry about those units in the field, because you just don't know. You never know. Yeah. Not everybody is maybe as passionate about doing this stuff as I am. And if it's just a paycheck and they're not really real concerned about quality control, then it bothers me. Plus, another thing that I do, every controller I build, I brew a batch of beer on it. And I'll put a label on the inside door saying what I brewed, when I brewed it, and
that's cool.
Yeah, I know, cool. Peace of mind. I'm a worrywart, so every time we get a system and ship it out, I'm like, I hope it's all right.
So, what are some of the things that we should be paying attention to when it comes to brewing electric with a HERMS coil? What are some
that's the cool thing about it.
We should look at.
There's not a lot of things to worry about with a HERMS coil, other than maybe leaking into the hot liquor tank. We had a competitor that had the coil just slid into connectors with an O-ring. It was really cool. I mean, you just slid it in, and it had stainless steel with an O-ring, and it held it. It captured it. But if you ever jostled the HLT for some reason and you didn't check that, the minute you turn on the wort pump, it would start pumping wort into the HLT because the pipe had come loose.
Right.
So, little things like that. We decided when we put that in our system that I use compression fittings, stainless steel compression fittings. So you can't take it out. You could if you wanted to loosen it. Really no need to. You can flush that coil without ever having to pull it out. And at least, and then we actually, I have a leak down tester that we put on the coil and we pump air into it, shut the valve off, and it'll measure within a half a pound, and you can just let it sit there, mark your needle place, and you can see if it's going to hold or not. So little things like that would be about the only thing that I've run into with the HERMS coil is it leaking into the HLT. It's pretty, and clean it. Just, you want to make sure and flush and clean it, because I was brewing one day and I went to open the valves and it shot, nasty, stinky wort all over me and all over the brew room. I mean, it was the kind of smell you've brewed. That wort smell, especially in the summer. Todd has hogs, so I'll keep the grains and put it in a soap bucket. And if he doesn't pick it, it'll pop. I mean, the bacteria, the sugars get eaten by bacteria, and it starts to stink. And that's a smell. And like the only thing worse would be like a rotting corpse. It smells that bad.
So when I was younger, growing up in the Maritimes, I grew up down in New Brunswick in Atlantic Canada.
Oh, cool.
And my uncle in Nova Scotia he still does, has a huge dairy farm. And
we have those here too.
You go and feed the cows, and he always trying to make sure the cows get their brew. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about, brew? He says, go in that room back there, and you're gonna see what I'm talking about. You have like a shitload of spent grain and everything else just there, and he's like,
exactly.
And I was like, oh my God. And he's like, well, you may not like it. The cows love it. And I'm like,
absolutely,
I'm glad they do.
It's a terrible smell. So Todd, I had got there. Todd was in his office, and that happened. And he came out of his office. What the hell is that smell? And he looked at me. You didn't flush the coil, did you? And no, I didn't. I completely forgot.
So are you just running like things like PBW and all that through the HERMS coil?
We have
to make sure it's clean.
Sure. We have a product called Brew Clean that K Connection sells. And it's a really good soap. I just mix it up in the HLT. There's usually probably 2 or 3 gallons left in the HLT when I'm done brewing. And I'll put a couple tablespoons of that in it and circulate the coil first into a bucket until it runs clear. And then I'll daisy chain the pumps, and I'll just flush it through the coil, through all the pumps back into the HLT, and I'll just let it run for several minutes. By the time you're done, I'll just top it. I'll dump it, top it with some more warm water, and let it rinse itself out. And usually that's all you got to do. Okay. Cleaning up the element in the boil kettle, you have to scrub it pretty good because it is immersed in hot wort. But other than that, there's really cleanup isn't any worse than doing an all-in-one. There's just a couple more vessels to do. The HLT really doesn't need anything other than the coil flushed, the mash and the boil kettle. But what I do is I do it in stages. When I start my boil, I start cleaning the mash. When the boil's done, the mash pot is already done. I can do the boil pot. I'm out. Usually 30 minutes after I finish brewing, I'm home.
Maybe a pressure washer would be a good idea.
Yeah. Another thing too is if you decide to go with a 3-vessel HERMS system, hopefully you have the forethought to get a drain in the floor and water installed in the wall, hot and cold water.
Yeah. So we just got the family and I were moving out about 20 minutes away from where we are here in Ottawa and out into the country. We got getting a brand new 2-year-old house with a 2-car heated garage. So great. Nice. No more freezing my ass off in the winter when I'm outside brewing.
That's awesome.
But right now, I'm getting the 200 amp panel and everything else, but I haven't gotten water and all that out there. I mean, when I go in through the garage, I go into our mudroom, there's the laundry sink and everything else. I'm like, garden hose is my friend.
Well, in relation, where's the mudroom wall in relation to the garage? Is it can you go through the wall there?
Oh yeah, I probably could. I mean, there's a huge crawl space that goes right up to the garage. So we're on a tankless hot water system. So
okay, I've heard of those. I've never had one. I bet
they're fantastic. As soon as you hit the hot water, it's like instant hot.
which is fantastic. So I'm like, well, I could do that. Or if I just keep collecting the water in the rain barrel, just heat it.
That would be really soft water too.
Yeah, just use that for cleaning and everything else.
Yeah. I wonder what it would be like to brew with.
One way to find out now.
I think you ought to do. I think you ought to. If I was testing the brewing water, especially rainwater, I would do the lightest, palest beer I could find.
Well, the first beer up on the menu that is going to be a Mexican lager.
Mm-hmm.
So
perfect.
That's going to be the perfect one. So
yeah. The lighter, of course, the lighter, the more you taste the water.
Yeah.
So you don't hide it with a bunch of hops and a bunch of malted, roasted malts. So I would definitely do a Kolsch or a Mexican lager, any kind of light beer. I bet that's good. I bet rainwater beer would be delicious.
Well, I'm going to have to get the well tested that we're going to be
Mm-hmm.
on. Plus, I'll probably also get the rainwater tested. Who knows? You never know what you have to add to it. So,
right. I went down that rabbit hole years ago and just said, nope, I'm not doing it. I'm not going to do water salts, I call them.
Yeah.
We just do RO. Yeah. Just do RO. Yeah. Make it simple.
That's what I was thinking, was putting an RO filter in at the house and just making my life a little easier. But I'm like, there's so many other expenses I have to do to the house right now. Like we just had a huge storm rip through here, and I say it's still almost half to 3/4 of the city is without power. So I'm like, oh, need a standalone generator that has to get put in the house.
Oh, definitely.
And then it's like,
are those hard to get now? I bet they are.
They're not that hard. It's the regular ones that are on wheels that you pull out and put away as you need them. This one would be permanently tied into the house. So if the power drops, it kicks in right away and runs off the propane tanks that we have for the house. So that's going to be happening. But it also means I get the brew if the power goes out. So, it's all good.
There you go. Yeah, that's always good. Yeah, no argument for me on that. Plus, you can ferment if you've got a chiller and you've got a keezer or kegerator. You've still got cold beer. So I'm all for that.
Exactly. Let's see. Well, what else do you think we should know about HERMS coils, the brow tag, or anything else?
You could go to browtag.com or Google it, and you can see our system. We'd be more than happy to give you a quote if you want something specific. If you would like to do something on your own, there's great resources. Heck, look at what we've done. See if you can copy that. We talked about eBay as a good source. There's some people on there that probably tried the same thing and gave up. So you might be able to cash in on somebody's misfortune. I know that sounds bad, but I've restored cars for 30 years. So I got really good deals on people that kind of got in over their head. And there's lots of really good videos on YouTube about people's setups and how they did this a certain way and why they did this. There's a way to make a 3-vessel HERMS system the way you want it, and it won't cost you $4,000. The biggest thing would be the controller. You had mentioned the Electric Brewery. That's a fantastic website to go to. Good resources. I think they even have their schematics listed online. You can build anything you want under any budget. You can do a 5-gallon HERMS if you wanted to. I wouldn't, but I would do more than 5 gallons.
What's the point? I mean, exactly. Only reason I'm doing 5 gallons now is because that's all my Brewzilla can handle.
Exactly. And another thing too is the controllers don't have to be super elaborate. All you need is a temperature controller, a contact, and a 220 plug. And an element, there's elements, a hot water heater element that uses a pipe thread. I mean, there's bulkhead fittings you can buy online where you can punch a hole in a stainless steel kettle, or, this thing that you get from the commercial people that's called a half barrel keg. You could, if you buy one of those at a swap meet, there's a lot of places. Bottom line is you don't have to buy a complete setup if you want to get into HERMS. Just MacGyver it, figure it out, and you'll be there. It's the only way to brew, my opinion.
Okay. So here's my dig at Josh. So
all right.
He's like, oh, here we go.
Yeah, let's go.
So have you guys actually trusted him to brew on the brow tag without breaking it?
Oh yeah, this is so funny. the first time that the day we did the video on our website, on their main page, where there's a video of us brewing, Todd said, okay, Josh, here's the deal. He gave us, Todd's very good at writing up manuals. So he did the manual, the operating manual for the Brow Talk. He handed it to Josh and he said, I want you to brew a batch of beer on this. And he looked at me and he said, don't do anything. Don't help him. Don't instruct him or anything. I said, okay, because I'm bad about that. And he was able to brew a batch of beer. But when he was moving the hoses around to do the sparge,
oh no,
he left a valve open. And I remember watching, and I was like, and then I give him credit. He pulled that thing off, and there's hot water coming out of the valve all over him. And he put the thing back on, and I was like, shut the valve off. And it was on the manual. He just wasn't paying attention, but he burned himself pretty good in his hand doing it.
Josh.
But other than that, and that beer came out pretty good. He did a good job. He's turned into, it was a Coles.
Yeah, go figure. Awesome. Well, James, thank you so much for the chuckle at Josh's expense. I greatly appreciate it. And thank you for your insight onto the HERMS stuff. It's great. It's going to help me out. I know it's going to help a lot of my friends out as well. I appreciate your time. If there's anything we can ever do on our end, please let us know. Happy to help out when we can.
And I'll say this, if anybody's got any questions, you're welcome to email me, jcarlson@cmbecker.com or jcarlson@homebrewhappyhour.com, and I'll be happy to help in any way I can.
Awesome. Guys, he's James. I'm Dan. Thanks for coming along for the ride and a beer or two along the way, and we'll see you on the other side.